Hello and welcome to Odds on Premier League Match Day 20. Happy New Year to all of you, to Tom Rennie, to 𝐿𝐿𝐴𝐧𝐧𝐞𝐿. Not the best year for him so far, or perhaps yes, when he sees his bank statement, who knows, Tom, but it was a pretty good match day for Arsenal, that's for sure.
Very good match day for Arsenal. Very poor match day for 𝐿𝐿𝐴𝐧𝐧𝐞𝐿. And I think, I'm trying to look into this still. It's still a bit murky because everyone was off because it was New Year's Day. But I think two things. Number one, he was the first person to lose his job in the calendar year 2026. But also, I think he might have quit. And if you've quit, you don't get the big Chelsea payoff. So in the end, what was the point of being Chelsea manager?
Yeah, indeed. Apparently, he didn't negotiate pretty good his new contract, just buffing that he had a Manchester City or Juventus offer, and out of the blue, you are out of Stamford Bridge. Indeed, big news, big surprise. Well, let's talk about everything. We had a pretty dull 1st of January, not because you might be hungover, but also the football games were absolutely awful on 1st of January. So let's try our best for this first match day of 2026. Stay with us, of course. Ask any question to Tom Rennie. And now let's go on with the show. Well, Tom, Saturday first game is Villa Park, Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest, two teams that lost last match day, especially in bad form. Nottingham Forest, 3 consecutive defeats, 5 defeats in the last 7 games. Luckily for them, West Ham are not winning, so they still have a healthy distance with the bottom 3. And for Aston Villa, the run of wins is over. 11 consecutive ones. At one point, it had to end at the Emirates. You could think is normal also to lose. Probably the way of losing was the problem.
Yeah, I think that and we predicted an Arsenal win, but they would win by exactly 1 goal. And of course, it was a 4-1 in the end. And I think that, look, Villa have had an incredible run, and they're still in the title race because you're in it until you're not. However, they are the least likely to win it. 6 points is a massive gap, and that was a big loss. But I think that what's interesting about Villa is the transfer window is now open. And I don't think anyone at Villa thought they would be this close to the title race. So I just wonder in this month, a bit like last year when they brought in Rashford and 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐶 and Marlon, whether they might be a bit like, we're close again. If they could have had some depth in their squad, they could have competed, I think, better against Arsenal. And you might say, well, Arsenal had players missing. They didn't have Declan Rice. But yeah, they had 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 and 𝗁𝗏. And, you know, when 𝐬𝐭𝐚𝐲 is off form, they can bring in 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝘀 now, and Kai Havertz is coming back. Like, Villa do not have the squad that Arsenal have got. And so when you're a couple of players down, when they lose Kamara in midfield, they lose that Kamara, Onana, Tielemans trio, no Matty Cash at fullback, so a lot of sort of fixes live. I don't know. I just think they weren't good enough in that kind of second string set of players that come in, and the levels dropped massively, and the first goal changed a lot. And a few individuals didn't perform on the day as well, which is a shame for Aston Villa. But all told, it's still been a great first half of the season. All told, they've got every chance of certainly qualifying for the Champions League, staying above Liverpool, staying above Chelsea, staying above Man United, and maybe winning the league. Look, unlikely though it is, they might. I think in this particular game, they go in as massive favourites because despite Forest's recent sort of, in the macro sense under Sean Dyche, improving, in the micro sense, the last 4 games have been quite poor. And I think the Everton game was a bit of a shock to everyone that Everton went to Forest with a sort of second string with injured players and won quite comfortably. So I expect Villa here to get on the front foot early. I expect them to create chances. I expect them to bring Watkins back into the starting 11 from the start if he's fit. I expect there to be Buendia, McGinn, Tielemans, Kamara. All the big players should be back. I think Onana picked up an injury, but you don't need him as much in this as you would have done against Arsenal a couple of days ago. So I expect a really aggressive Aston Villa, who are the 3rd best team at home in the Premier League this season. And in terms of Forest, I don't know what's missing at the moment, to be honest. I think that last season, so much of the campaign was carried by Elanga and carried by Hudson-Odoi. Hudson-Odoi had some good moments against Tottenham a couple of weeks ago, but beyond that, he's flattered to deceive across the season. I think 𝐜𝐭𝐴𝐧𝐧𝐞𝐿 is a good player. Is he a great player? Is he a goal scorer? Is he someone that can be the difference maker? So far, he hasn't proven to be. And so goals have just been hard to come by for this team, and clean sheets have been hard to come by as well. A few times 𝗵𝗏𝗀𝐻 and Murillo have been caught out this season. So I think you have to go for the Villa win at 1.83. One defeat in 12 in all comps is still an incredibly good record. I'm struggling to see goals right now in Nottingham Forest, but maybe I'm just being swayed by the Everton game. I don't know, but didn't create many chances there. Didn't create anything against Fulham in their previous away game that I watched. So take the City game out of it because playing City is somewhat anomalous. Villa win to 0 at 𝗵 I think is a really decent bet. I think it'll be quite narrow. Looking again at the wins that Villa have had, 2-1 Chelsea, 2-1 Villa, 3-2 West Ham, 2-1 in Europe. Win by exactly 1 goal is 3.5. And I am still just on the Rodgers hype train. So any time for him is 2.88.
Well, Aston Villa to win also for Pathfinder in the individual markets. Watkins, anytime goal scorer for 𝐿𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐴, also going for 1-0, 2-0. Or 3-0 for Aston Villa. Next game, Brighton, Burnley. We had a comment of someone saying he's going to attend service crew. He's going to attend his first Premier League match ever, and it's going to be Brighton against Burnley. So, Tom, he wants to know what to expect in this game. I guess you should expect Brighton finally to win 3 draws and 3 defeats in the last 6 games, winless since the 30th of November. I guess you saw them against West Ham, and you will tell me if they have enough to beat this poor Burnley.
They've got enough to beat Burnley, and I think they're another team, a bit like Bournemouth, a bit like Fulham maybe a couple of weeks ago, that if West Ham were any good and were actually making a fight of this to stay in the Premier League, a team like Brighton might be a bit concerned, because I think if West Ham had someone to replace Callum Wilson in the game a couple of days ago, there's every chance West Ham, who have been awful, might well have won that match. There's a few things missing at the moment. I think that there's a real lack of pace about this team. And Mitoma and the other wingers they've got in the team, Minte, have not been particularly effective this season. They've been fit, they've been injured, they've been fit, they've been injured. Beyond that, where's the pace? Where's the pace in this team? And I think you can see that in games like against West Ham, where when they drop off a bit, the opposition, and there's no space in behind, there's not really another idea currently for Brighton. You've got lots of good players, tidy players, 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗀, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗀, they're all tidy little players. But are they dangerous? Are they effective? Are they a team that, like the best Brighton sides of the last 10 years, can get in behind and cause some damage and spin you around? And right now, without the wingers in good form or being fit, I don't think they can. So that's why these results have been stodgy. Draws and narrow losses and a 0-0 against Sunderland. They're just missing a spark. And I think the January transfer window is really important for Brighton. If they want to, I don't think they'll be involved in any sort of relegation battle again, because West Ham are so bad. But look, let's say West Ham win 3 in a row. Suddenly Brighton are thinking, oh dear, we need to start winning some games now. 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏𝗀𝗏's run of form has come to an end. Despite his penalty goal against West Ham, he also missed that really bad attempted Panenka. So there's just a bit missing at Brighton right now. And I think that they're a stodgy team with a stodgy manager lacking inspiration. That should open the door to Burnley, but I don't think it will. Another game for Burnley. How many times have we seen it this season against Newcastle, where they are in the match, they're fine, but they find a way to lose? It's been the story of Burnley all season long. They're a nice little team. They're a well-coached little team, but they do not have the required quality to stay in the Premier League. And it's been the same all season long. And at this point, you know, West Ham are going to find it tough to attract players. Burnley are going to find it tough to attract players. Wolves are going to find it tough to attract players, because if you're in the bottom 3 in January, you've got to overpay, move fast, and be kind of desperate. And I just don't think people are going to move to Burnley. The wages won't be great. And if there's a chance of going to West Ham or Burnley, you'll choose West Ham because the wages are better. And so, look, I just see a championship team that'll make it to 25 points, and that's about it. So, again, they will compete in this game. They'll make it tough for Brighton. I wouldn't be surprised to see both teams scoring in this game, but it being 2-1 to the home team. It screams 2-1 to the home team. So look at the Brighton win at 1.54 as your first bet, and then look at the under market here. Neither team particularly blessed with goal scorers. Under 2.5 in a Brighton win is 3.75. A more conservative under 3.5 in the match, and Brighton win is 2.2. I'd be looking 2-1 Brighton, 1-0 Brighton. Kind of unwatchable, but important win for the Seagulls.
Well, unwatchable, except for our user. Going to a Premier League stadium is always a good experience. Also, 𝐿𝐴𝐵𝗴𝗀 going for Brighton to win and under 3.5 goals, exactly your tip, David, Brighton, and both teams to score. Pathfinder, Burnley won't score 2 goals. Indeed, probably not even one. So imagine 2 goals. Next one, Wolves, West Ham. Oh my God, this game, Tom, I guess is with a cross in the calendar for West Ham to win. Fulkrug is gone. Looks like Tati Castellanos is going to be his replacement, the Argentinian coming from Lazio. I guess also this is a match ball for Nuno Espiritu Santo, unable to win. This West Ham ended the year with a draw against Brighton. Your favorite player, Paquetá, scoring. And what to say about Wolves, Tom? At least the run of defeats is over, and we will talk about Man United later. But yeah, this is a massive game for West Ham.
Yeah, I think it's a bigger game for West Ham than Wolves. I think there's no scenario, even with the Wolves win here, that they stay in the Premier League. They're just too far behind. But there have been improvements in the last couple of weeks under Rob Edwards. You've got to give them that. They've gone to a 3-5-2. They're trying to get support to Strand Larsen up front. The 5 in midfield has been reasonably impressive. I think Mane has come in, who I hadn't really seen before, and has looked lively and interesting. Matthias Mane, 18 years of age, just thrown him in. And yeah, he's given them a youthful exuberance that was missing. They're still poor defensively. They've still got a bad goalkeeper. The confidence is still on the ground. But look, they went toe-to-toe with the poor Man United a couple of days ago, and they could have won that game. They got a decent draw. They went toe-to-toe with Liverpool at Anfield and played quite well. Same with Arsenal recently, nearly got a draw out of that game. So the poor performances have been the home games, which is the Brentford match and the Man United home game. But away, they have got a real fist of it recently. And I just have a feeling for Wolves here. I just think they've got every chance of winning their first and maybe only game in the Premier League this season, because there have been some gradual incremental improvements. And in terms of West Ham, the signings are so desperately needed. And I don't know whether they're going to get Castellanos. I don't know if they're going to sign Traore and another player. I think they're trying to bring in today to maybe be registered to play for this game. But if they don't, I don't think they can win. They can't win because when Callum Wilson goes off the field, there are no attackers. There's just no one going forward anymore. And, you know, Graham Potter and David Sullivan were asleep at the wheel in the summer, thinking that this attack was good enough to stay in the Premier League. Look, they've got defensive issues. There's every chance Todibo's missing for this game. I'm not a fan of Todibo, but if the replacement is Mavropanos and 𝐿𝐴 as a defensive pairing, then I hope Todibo's fit, because the other two are even worse. Midfield seems fine with Fernandes, Magassa and Potts going forward. Paqueta, he had an assist. It was his first assist in a year for Bowen against Brighton. Plus, he scores the pen. He gives one away as well. But that's about as effective as Paqueta has been in any game for a year. So that was good. And Bowen remains a very good player. I think 6 Premier League goals for him. If they can win this game while Wilson is on the field, then I think that's the argument for West Ham winning here. Score 2 goals before Wilson has to go off in the 60th minute. Because from that point, as you saw against Brighton and Villa and loads of times, when you lose him, they don't hold the ball up. They're all defensive, and the defense isn't good enough to hold a team out. So I actually think it's a great chance for Wolves here. West Ham just have to win. They're the only team in the league that haven't played Wolves yet, because of the way the fixtures fell this year. So you've got to beat Wolves twice, and then you've got to win 9 other games to stay in the Premier League. They have 3 wins already, got to beat Wolves twice, and then you see where you go from there. Nottingham Forest is coming up on Tuesday next week. But to make that game interesting, they have to win here. I don't think they will. You couldn't back a West Ham win. They don't have it in them right now to win a game of Premier League football. And without someone to replace Wilson during the game, they'll fall flat on their backside the very second he goes off, if he's even fit enough to start, because he played 60 minutes 2 days ago. And apparently this professional footballer can't handle 2 games, 60 minutes in 5 days. It's almost like it was a bad signing. So screams draw this for me. At 3.5, I really enjoyed the way Wolves were set up recently, as I've mentioned. West Ham are struggling to win. They've drawn 2 of the last 5. Wolves 1 draw in 5, but went close against big teams in others. If you are going to pick a winner, I'd pick Wolves. I think if they are going to win a home game this season, this is probably it for Wolverhampton Wanderers. And West Ham already lost to Wolves this season at Molineux in the Carabao Cup. So I think West Ham are just dirt, filth, horrendous. And Wolves seem like they're doing something. So take the Wolves win.
Well, they are favorites according to the bookies. This match screams draw. Pathfinder, usually with when 2 bad teams meet, they tend to draw. Indeed, the classic both teams to lose. Oanona is also considering how good Wolves is playing lately, especially if we take in consideration where they were coming from. And we have Roy the Boy going for a double chance in this case for West Ham. Actually, our smart bet tool is also predicting double chance for West Ham, 𝐿2, with odds 1.57 if you want to back West Ham a little bit in this game. And the last game we have on Saturday's Bournemouth Arsenal. We mentioned how good the last match day was for Arsenal, not because the gap was open, 4 points with Man City also, but it was a big win. Finally, more than 1 goal margin with the rival, and on top of that, of course, one team that was considered a title candidate like Aston Villa. We saw them struggling a little bit against big teams in the Premier League. Was not the case against Aston Villa, and the 4 points gap, I guess, Tom, is very, very positive considering we are just starting the year. I guess Arteta would sign this at the start of the season, and they should win against Bournemouth. They are in really poor form despite the draw against Chelsea. They are winless in 10 since the 26th of October.
Yeah, real concern for Bournemouth at the moment. Again, a bit like Brighton, a bit like Fulham. If West Ham were any good and could put a run of results together, they're another team that might be looking over their shoulder thinking, are we going to get the 5 wins required from what's left to stay in the Premier League? And the big issue at the moment is keeping clean sheets. They're conceding so many goals. 2 against Chelsea, 4 against Brentford, 1 against Burnley, 4 against United. Clean sheet before that in the goalless draw against Chelsea. And I think a lot of the players that they have currently available to them are nowhere near as good as they once had. I think they're playing James Hill and they're playing Senesi, whereas previous seasons they had Sabani and 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 and then 𝗀𝐻𝐻 behind them. I think 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 has had some dodgy moments in goal in recent weeks as well. So that's the issue there. Plus, they've lost Tyler Adams in central midfield. The Adams-Scott partnership has been fantastic. To lose Adams at this particular moment, and they were already in a bad run, I think is significant. And I'm not expecting 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐷𝐿 to play here. I know Andoni Iraola said following the game a couple of days ago against Chelsea when his long throw led to a goal that he thought he was going to play. But if you've got an asset about to be sold for £65 million, in the end, I think hard-nosed business will come in. They'll say, sorry, you can't let 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐷𝐿 play here, pull his hamstring and cost us £65 million when the replacements are already lined up. So I think that makes a big difference. 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐷𝐿 has sort of carried this team in recent weeks with not only goals, but also creativity, not only his long throw, but the confidence that he has given teammates around him. And other guys have not really stood up consistently this season. Evanilson, Kluivert, 1 or 2 others. They've just not been consistently good enough, Bournemouth. And I think the slide will continue here. In terms of Arsenal, I think that was their best performance of the season against Villa. Probably better than the Tottenham victory. I think that, the first goal was obviously very important. The first half was very narrow. And I think personally, Gabriel fouled the goalkeeper. I know it's hard to give a decision in favour of Emi Martinez, but I think this probably was a foul from Gabriel. You can't put the arm in the face of the goalkeeper. Wasn't given, scored from a corner, but this time they built on it, which is not something Arsenal have done a great deal this season. The second goal, Ødegaard to 𝗲𝗏𝗏𝗏 was very, very good. I'd have a concern here maybe that Declan Rice is missing. As good as Ødegaard, 𝗲𝗏𝗏𝗏 and Mourinho looks on paper, I think Declan Rice is maybe Arsenal's only real world-class player, who I think is irreplaceable. And so to not have him, if this game does get topsy-turvy end-to-end as Bournemouth like, to not have him on the field to wrestle control back for Arsenal could be an issue if Bournemouth bring their A game here. And also up front, I'd have an interesting look at whether 𝐬𝐭𝐴𝐴𝐷𝐿 continues. 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Jesus is fit. Kai Havertz was on the bench a couple of days ago. Mourinho could play up there. 𝐬𝐭𝐴𝐴𝐷𝐿 doesn't do enough. Doesn't score enough. Doesn't hold the ball up well enough. Doesn't inspire confidence. Maybe it's a big game for him if he does start, because if he doesn't start delivering, and now, I think 𝐬𝐭𝐴𝐴𝐷𝐿 will bench surf until that inevitable loan to 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 in 18 months. So really tough game this for Bournemouth. I think Arsenal's form has been patchy in terms of performance. You add the performance now against Villa to the wins they have been getting. You have to go for the Arsenal win here at 1.57. I do think it'll be quite narrow, similar to the Brighton, similar to the Everton, similar to the Wolves. Arsenal by exactly 1 goal is 3.5. I did note, having done Arsenal win to 0 for the majority of this season, they've stopped keeping clean sheets. And so I'm changing that bet to Arsenal and both teams to score 2-1 Arsenal. I can see a soft Bournemouth goal, but an Arsenal win.
Well, room for improvement for Arsenal, especially on the 𝐿𝐭𝐴 side and the offensive part. Indeed, high odds to take Arsenal. James is telling us, indeed, 1.57 against Bournemouth struggling are high odds. Hassan has a question for you, Tom. Do you think Iraola will be sacked?
No, I don't think he'll be sacked. No, I think that replacing Iraola will be a very difficult job. The market is not great. I think Bournemouth aren't a kind of panicky, hire whoever's unemployed sort of club like West Ham and Wolves have been this season. So, no, I don't think so. But things change. If again, it all really depends for all these clubs down the bottom. If West Ham can put a winning run together, if they can, there'll be a lot of sweating managers at Forest and Leeds and Bournemouth and Brighton. But unless that happens, I think it's all pretty inconsequential.
You remember Iraola once upon a time was the son-in-law or the brother-in-law, uncomfortable, shy one that gets invited to the Christmas lunch. This is what you told me. This is what you told me when he got to the Premier League, and now he is building up with Bournemouth, although struggling also because Bournemouth are selling the best players in the last 6 months. Indeed. Yeah. Well, perhaps we see Man United manager sacked, Ruben Amorim, who knows playing at Elland Road, really good odds to take Leeds. Is impossible to predict this Man United. They are so bad, but we expected them to beat Wolverhampton. It was not the case. They were so bad also against Newcastle. At least they got the 3 points. The good news, I guess, is when we see the table and they are level on points with Chelsea, only 2 points behind Liverpool, because, Tom, they've been awful, and Leeds, they've been great, especially at Elland Road. So I think there is value on Leeds here.
Yeah, definitely. I'm surprised that United are slight favourites. Man United, that is. But as you can see, it's very slight because the Leeds form has been fantastic. And what was funny about the game against Liverpool yesterday was that they rested players. They rested players for the Man United game. They gave 𝐿𝐵𝗿𝗀 a rest, whose scoring run has ended, but he did score a goal that was disallowed in this game. And there was 1 or 2 others they were able to give a little break to, because the target is to beat Manchester United at home. There is a fierce rivalry historically between the two clubs and the two fan bases, and they are historically 2 of the biggest clubs in English football. And so the atmosphere here is going to be absolutely incredible, and Leeds are going to be super up for it. The only note of caution I would have about Leeds is they're not winning games. They are drawing games and are suddenly very, very hard to beat. But the 2 victories were against Chelsea, which was very impressive. But I think it's fair to say Chelsea were at the start of an implosion, which has led to the manager leaving. And Crystal Palace, where Crystal Palace got done so dirty, they had 3 games in 6 days. And the other 2 games were just more important than the league game at Elland Road. So just a moment of caution on it. I do still think it's very impressive. I'm not trying to take it away from Leeds, but I do think that winning games in the Premier League is the hardest thing to do. And they are not doing that in this run. Though the draws they have been getting have been impressive. 𝐿𝐵𝗿𝗀's been great. If he stays fit, there's every chance he scores 15 goals in the Premier League this season. If you've got a striker who does that, you are normally good enough to stay up. To not have Rodon at the back and to have to play Bornau, who was fine against Liverpool, I think could be a problem. But I think in midfield, Stark and Ampadu and 𝐵𝗀 have been great. Aronson's work rate's been fantastic. If 𝐿𝐵𝗿𝗀 comes back in alongside him, I would really fancy them to win this match, Leeds. And if you can win home games, with, again, West Ham being as they are, the gap, that's the competition between these 2 clubs. If West Ham lose the weekend and Leeds win, it's 10 points. I don't think that's a surmountable number for West Ham in the second half of the campaign. So could be a huge, decisive, potentially, weekend in the relegation battle for Leeds. In terms of Manchester United, look, I do think they miss Bruno Fernandes. They absolutely miss Brian Mbeumo is off for AFCON, and they've missed their better defenders. They've had no Maguire and no De Ligt for some time, but they also miss a manager who can read the room. I just could not believe they lined up 3-4-3 a couple of days ago in the home game against Wolves. We were all shocked because against Newcastle previously, they'd gone to a 4-2-3-1. It suited the players they've got. It got the best out of 𝐵𝗿𝗏 and Casemiro. It got Dorgu's best performance for Man United. All of it. It just made sense. And then Amorim went back to the old formation, which has not worked for a year. He's an incredibly arrogant man. Just an unbelievably arrogant individual, Amorim, who who thinks his idea is the greatest idea in the history of football. It just isn't. And he hasn't got the players to play it. And that has been proved time and time and time and time again. If they sacked Amorim now and brought in Enzo Maresca, I'd back him to be top 4. If they continue with Amorim, I don't think they're going to make it. And if United don't make the top 4, this season would have been a failure because they have one of the biggest wage bills in all of football. So that's the challenge. And if they're going to make top 4, they have to win a game like this. 𝗏𝗏 has been good. I'm not sure about the 𝗏𝗏-Martinez partnership if they go to 4, but that's what's there. So hopefully they've worked on it this week. I think Casemiro and 𝗏𝗏𝗏 is a really good defensive base if they play the 2 and not the stupid formation. I'd maybe look to, if I play 3 out the front, not play 𝗀𝐿𝐵𝐺 and bring someone else in to give some width, but there's not a great deal of rotation right now at Manchester United. I think they have to go 4-2-3-1 and grind out a draw. If they do that, I think there's every chance they get something. But they're going to go 3-4-3, and that means they will lose this game. Leeds at 2.78 is irresistible on the run they have been on. Calvert-Lewin will start. Anytime goal scorer 2.63. I think you've still got to ride that. 7 goals in his last 6 Premier League appearances. And a nice couple of group bets here. Again, if you fancy Leeds, it will be one of these scorelines. 1-0, 2-0, or 3-0 together is 5, which I think is really, really interesting. I do think they'll concede a soft goal, Leeds. 1 against Sunderland, 1 against Palace, 1 against Brentford, 3 against Liverpool in the previous game. So 2-1, 3-1, or 4-1. 2-1 most likely. 6.5. Really good odds here for likely scorelines. And I don't think Amorim is going to be sensible enough to not do the Amorim thing. And that opens it up for Leeds.
Well, no defeats in the last 6 for Leeds, so really in form. It would be an interesting twist seeing Maresca on the bench with Man United, perhaps getting Garnacho in the winter transfer window, and the Premier League would be even crazier. Draw also possible for 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐿𝐴. Leeds draw, no bet for 𝐻𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐻. We have another one going for double chance, in this case for United, really high odds for this game. And if 1st of January in terms of football was pretty boring, I guess also we should expect a low scoring affair. In the next one, Everton, Brentford, one of the boring games was Brentford Spurs, goalless draw. Although Brentford 7 points in the last 3 games, so it's a good tally during this Christmas period. And Everton, Tom, beat Forest 2-0. Last 6 games, both teams to score no in Everton's games.
Yeah, I mean, what a win that was for Everton against Forest. That was massively unexpected and really, really impressive. It was classic David Moyes, really. He was just able to put out a really organised team, everyone doing their jobs. And despite the issues with no Alcaraz, no Keane, no Branthwaite, no Dewsbury Hall, most significantly, Grealish is coming back from, a hangover probably, but they said illness, so we'll see. All of that, I don't know. But it was, anyway, but I think really impressive victory, unexpected victory, the kind of thing that David Moyes has been doing for 20 years in the Premier League for West Ham and for Everton. And look, I think that at home, they're really solid. They haven't won as many as they probably should have done, but they are really solid. I think it's 8 clean sheets in 19, home and away. Only Arsenal have got more clean sheets this season. 𝗏𝗏𝗏's been great. O'Brien going back to centre-half, I think, is fine. Patterson comes in at full-back because of the injury to Keane. It's tough to break them down. I think Timo Rebbenham and James Garner in midfield as well. I've been a bit down on Everton's central midfield, but I actually think from the Forest game, I was really impressed by their work rate, tenacity, the amount of ground they covered, and it allowed those in front, who aren't the first-choice trio behind the striker, to excel. And it's worth noting Barry scored a couple of goals as well. If that central striker role for a David Moyes team starts playing well, Mikel Antonio style, Louis Saha style, then I think they could be on to a winner here, Everton, and be on for a solid top half finish. Haven't been amazing at home at the Hill Dickinson this season, but Brentford been awful away, 7 defeats across their first half of the season. And thankfully, I was working on Sunderland Man City last night, so I didn't watch this game. But I did speak to someone this morning who told me it was the worst game of association football we'd seen in 10 years. So that's the only review I've got currently of the game against Tottenham. But you expect that from Brentford. They are a team that are just so hard to beat. They always were under Thomas Frank. They are now under Keith Andrews. At home, they score a lot of goals. Away from home, they make it tough for you. They made it tough for City a couple of weeks ago. and they got a good win at Wolves. Everyone should go to Wolves and win. That's exactly what they did. But there is a lack of inspiration. I think this game is going to be a real grind. First goal wins it. Look at the under 2.5 goals market. I'd take the Everton win at 2.49. Everton win under 2.5 goals is 5. 1-0 either way. I just pick for the home team.
Well, 8 clean sheets for Pickford, according to the Oddspedia website. We have the stats there. First half goalless draw could be a good choice indeed. Pathfinder, Everton, double chance, and under 2.5 goals. Under, and under for this game. Next one, Fulham, Liverpool. Another disappointment for Liverpool. The draw against Leeds, really bad, really boring. Also, 𝗲𝗏𝗀𝗀 being criticized for not stepping up. I think the first 6 months of 𝗲𝗏𝗀𝗀, of Isak, even if he's not available, were really, really poor. And be careful, because Fulham are having now a good run, Tom, 10 points in the last 12.
Yeah, and I think that some of the wins have been really impressive. I thought they well deserved to win at West Ham. They well deserved to win at Burnley. It was a tough game against Forest, but got the win there. And don't discount coming behind to get a draw against Crystal Palace last night as well. I haven't had the chance to see that game in full as yet, but I just think that they are never out of a game, Fulham, which is impressive. I think 𝐿𝐭𝐿𝐴 coming in for 𝗵𝗲𝗀 has been an improvement. 𝗵𝗲𝗀 goes off to AFCON. You're a bit concerned about what they're going to do, but I think 𝐿𝐿𝐴's a better player than 𝗵𝗲𝗀. I hope Fulham fans aren't too annoyed by that, but I think he's very, very good. I think he has a better balance with Anderson. And I think a few weeks ago, they weren't creating chances. So Marco Silva pushed 𝐬𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐵 back to have a more creative, deep-lying number 8. 𝐬𝐿𝐵's gone off for AFCON, so they've gone back to the more defensive pairing of 𝗵𝗏𝗀 and 𝗏𝐿𝐿𝐴. But because of the wins they'd already got, that now makes a bit more sense. And Smith Rowe has stepped up. Jimenez has stepped up. Wilson's been great. And that has led to some really, really good results. So impressed with Fulham in this run. And they've won the winnable games. The question now is, can they win a big game against tough opposition? In this run, the only team I would have maybe expected them to lose to was Newcastle, and lose they did at St James's by 2-1. So this will be the first really significant big scalp in recent times for Fulham. And for Liverpool against Leeds, look, again, we discussed Leeds. They're really well organised and deserve their point. But also, there's a real spark missing at Liverpool. I think that Florian Wirtz, to your point, he's just not delivered. Couple of little moments, couple of little flashes, but again, against Leeds, really flattered to see, did nothing of particular note moving forward. 𝗍𝐿𝐴 had a couple of driving runs, but it all just feels like a big group of individuals that might be able to do something for Liverpool. And that's what it felt like against Leeds. There's no team at the moment. And pushing Frimpong forward with Bradley behind him makes them more solid on the right. But again, Frimpong is playing in the Salah role. And for whatever people might think about Mo Salah, is he as good as he once was? And all of that conversation, which is interesting and legitimate, Frimpong's not Salah. And so now you've got to play with Frimpong getting towards the end line, crossing, have runners in the box, whereas you knew Salah was never going to cross the ball. So you didn't need to do that. There is a fundamental change required in how Liverpool play. And right now, they see a team in total transition, which is something we've spoken about all season. If they want to compete this campaign and guarantee Champions League qualification, a defender's got to come in to play alongside Virgil van Dijk. Maybe another striker to come in to replace Isak, who's going to miss the majority of the season, to support 𝗍𝐿𝐴. Maybe an actual right winger if they are planning to replace Salah in the long term, because Frimpong ain't it over on that side. There's loads of issues there. So the odds for a Liverpool win are pretty poor. Frankly, looking at these odds, Fulham at 4.25, I quite fancy them. Just the odds draw me in. That's worth a fiver of anyone's money. If you're looking for a surprise bet here. Personally, I think it screams draw at 3.9. That would be the top tip. Screams 1-1 at 7, because I think both teams are able to score, but I think defenses should be on top in this one. There's a couple of individuals worth looking at. Raul Jimenez, one of my favourite players of all time on a decent scoring run. Anytime is 3. 𝗍𝐿𝐴 will get it if it's for Liverpool. Anytime him is 2.5. But 1-1 with both those guys scoring.
Different opinions for this game, both things to score. For Pathfinder, we have some people going for Liverpool, Chinonso, double chance for Liverpool to win for Kay Jansen. Others are picking Fulham with these great odds indeed. Over 4 months spaghetti, Liverpool aren't playing for the manager. Slot won't survive the next season. let's see if he survives until summer. I think so, but yeah, very likely not for the new season. Now, fourth, Liverpool in Champions League spots. Next game is Newcastle Crystal Palace. Both are level on points in the middle of the table. Palace, I guess, very tired. They are in a bad form right now, only 1 point in the last 4 games. They are playing every 3 days with the conference. We all know they have a lot of games, and Newcastle finally won away from home against Burnley, but it's another team, Tom, suffering from a lot of games and not having a deep squad to compete for European spots this season.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. But I also think some players have not delivered this season for Newcastle, as well as the rotation they've had. Not enough from Gordon. 𝗲𝗏 has only just come in after a long-term injury. Not enough from Barnes. Well, Tomáda's been a bit hot and cold. I think more hot than cold, but he hasn't been consistent like 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐧𝐧𝐞𝐿 was. You have to compare everything to that, because the reason they're in the Champions League, and we think about them in these terms, is because 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐧𝐴𝐶 was so good for the entirety of last season that he fired them up there, and no one has sort of filled that void in the team. Midfield, we haven't seen much of Joelinton, Tonali and Guimaraes this season. We saw it against Burnley, and I think you saw them overpower the Burnley midfield. Of course, Josh Cullen got injured, which made a big difference in that game. But I think that 𝗲𝗏𝗏 at fullback has done fine. He's done well, but I'd like to see, if I was Newcastle, if as and when Livramento is fit, or as and when Trippier is fit, give that balance back to the team that's been lacking since Miley has been shoved over there. But other players have not delivered this season. I mean, what's Jacob Ramsey done? A £40 million odd signing from Villa. He's really done nothing so far this campaign. When Joe Willock's been brought in, what's he done? Nothing really. There's individuals here that have got to start contributing to what Eddie Howe is trying to do. Otherwise, they were overpriced signings as Newcastle continue to struggle to attract players who maybe would rather play in London than play in the Northeast or play for another club. They're trying to transition from where they were to where they want to be, and they are struggling right now. This is not a top team. It's a very, very good team, but I wouldn't expect this team to challenge for the Premier League title, which of course is the goal of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, who've bought the club. So interesting moment for Newcastle. Second half of the season, got to be better than the first. They can't use the excuse of Europe for why they're not in the race for Champions League qualification. The only way to do that is to win 3, 4, 5 games in a row. Maybe that starts now with the second away win of the season coming a couple of days ago. In terms of Palace, I think they've got more of an excuse than Newcastle in terms of depth, because there really is a first team and that's it. Look at the players that are coming in. Justin 𝗵𝗏𝗏, Will Hughes. I mean, these are fine players, but are they as good as the players they are replacing in Wharton and Ismaila Sarr? No, I think the drop-off is quite significant. And then losing Chris Richards means Lerma goes back into the back line, or 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴 gets a game. Again, good players, but a big drop-off. They lose Daniel Munoz, who I think is their most important player. Nathaniel Klein comes in as a bit of a yesterday's man in the Premier League. Again, he's fine, but he's not as good as the player he replaced. And that's been, I think, pivotal to this run of form, where they've picked up 3 draws and 2 defeats in their last set of games, all competitions, pushed Arsenal hard, eliminated from the Carabao Cup. They go into a playoff round in the Conference League because they had to stretch their resources too thin. Could have lost against Fulham in the end a couple of days ago. I wouldn't say I was concerned about Palace, but I can't see them finishing any higher than the top of the bottom half this season. I can't see them winning this game either, with the rotation required, which they don't have and Newcastle do. So take the Newcastle win at 1.73. The Magpies have also been pretty good at home this season. Not spectacular as you kind of think they are, but 5 wins from 9, 2 draws. That's okay. I'm struggling to see a Crystal Palace goal. Lots to talk about Jean-Philippe Mateta's future in this transfer window. So take Newcastle win to 0 at double your money. First decent double your money bet. And then maybe even look at a Newcastle handicap here. A -1 is 2.88. I think Newcastle score a couple of goals. 2 at home against Chelsea, 3 at Burnley, 2 against Fulham. It all depends on whether they keep the clean sheet, which I think they will. 2-0 to Newcastle or more, I think is likely.
8th in the home table, Newcastle this season. Most of the people going for Newcastle to win this one. 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴 also for both teams to score. David, the opposite, going for 𝑋2 in this one. And our smart bet is going for first half draw, which could be a good option. Actually, 2.45 for our smart bet option for this Newcastle Crystal Palace. Then We have Tottenham, Sunderland. Indeed, also this could be easily a first half draw. Both drew goalless draws in the first game of the year, and the Spurs are now 13th in the table at home. Tom, fourth worst team in the league, only 8 points. A lot of concerns for Thomas Frank. And Sunderland, the opposite, undefeated at home, grab a point against City. They've proven to be so competitive against the big teams this season.
Yeah, what's amazing about Spurs is that with the point they picked up against Brentford yesterday, they are the best team away from home in the country, in the Premier League, which is insane. Like, they've got the most points of any team away from home, but at home, they've got the same amount of wins as West Ham and Burnley. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, it does not make sense. I know it's slightly different at home and away, and teams low block and all that sort of stuff, but it shouldn't be like that. So it's really interesting, whether it's an atmosphere thing, a confidence thing. I really can't tell you. It's been fascinating to watch, and I look forward to Thomas Frank, in post this season, explaining it to us. I think there's a little bit of lack of creativity, certainly a lack of confidence, and they're not getting the second goal in home games. If they started to do that, I think a bit like Arsenal against Villa a couple of days ago, when the second goes in, there'll be a flood of confidence, a relaxation, and they might go on to win from there. But they have struggled at home. And I think they'll struggle here as well. You've got to look at the form. Just 2 wins at home all season, plenty of draws against pretty poor teams, a couple of losses as well against the likes of Fulham, which you wouldn't have expected. And I think that will happen against the Sunderland, who, the work rate they put in is incredible. Like, you really realize how little some teams are working when you watch Sunderland play. The running against Newcastle, the running against Man City, the work rate against Brighton, so tough to beat because you have to beat them. And I thought 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐷𝗏𝗏 and 𝗵𝐿𝐿𝐴 at centre-half were fantastic against Man City. They put Haaland in a box and kept him there all game. My only concern here would be the amount of effort they put in against City on the Thursday. Will they be fit enough to go again against Spurs on the Sunday, considering there's no rotation available here because of the sheer amount of players that are away at AFCON or unavailable to them? So, look, it screams draw, frankly, at 3.85. Sunderland got 3 draws in a row. Spurs drew a couple of days ago against Brentford. Draw at 3.85. The 2 most likely scorelines, 0-0 or 1-1, 4.33. If you go the Spurs win, make it exactly 1 goal. But I think it looks like a 0-0. They both drew 0-0 yesterday. I think they might go again.
Well, Sunderland under 2.5 for 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐷𝗏𝗏, Tottenham 1x for 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐷𝗏𝗏. Amam Spaghetti, I think I agree with him. All teams have been disappointing this season. It's been a weird season. I wouldn't say all, no. Sunderland is overperforming, but in general, I would agree. Perhaps all these games, the FIFA Club World Cup, we are in a World Cup year, so I guess all the players have a look, of course, at the World Cup, and it's been a bit disappointing overall, I would say, across all 5 leagues in Europe, including the Champions League. And the last game, Tom, Man City, Chelsea. Of course, we have to talk about Maresca's being sacked the 1st of January after the draw against Bournemouth. He was named Coach of the Month in November, and after some weeks, he's out. Apparently, the Strasbourg manager is gonna come to Stamford Bridge. It's a weird decision, Tom, on Maresca after winning a couple of trophies. Some people are saying because of his negotiation skills, and he put Man City or Juventus on the table. But were you surprised about Maresca being sacked? Is this a good decision, in your opinion, for Chelsea?
I thought he'd definitely go at the end of the season. I'm surprised that he went on the 1st of January, but it sort of seems like it's been coming for a while. There'd been all these reports about the micromanagement of the ownership. Specifically, the reports were about 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗏𝗏 running the club and him having his say on certain lineups, certain signings, thinking about maybe selling Cole Palmer because Chelsea are a player trading business first, and then a club trying to win things second. Plus, there's all these stories about the medical team having a lot of say about who plays and who doesn't, because the club see them as commodities to sell, and a pulled hamstring means they lower their value. And fascinating. I'm looking forward to seeing what Maresca has to say in post about all of this when he's allowed to. But I think he felt the conditions were no longer suited to him, and he's won the Club World Cup and he won the Conference League. His reputation has not been damaged at all by being Chelsea manager. He'll get a great job after this. Maybe it will be Man City if the rumours of him talking to them are to be believed. Maybe it'll be Juve. Who knows? I think every club in the world would like to have Enzo Maresca as manager. And he's come away from Chelsea untarnished, which is not easy. And that's what he's done. So I'm surprised at the timing. I'm not surprised it's going to be 𝐿iam to replace him because I think, again, they're going with this really micromanagement American sports model. He's essentially managing Chelsea B, Strasbourg, another Blue-Co business. And so the next guy in at Strasbourg will be the next Chelsea manager. And that's how they're going to run it, with apologies to Strasbourg. I mean, I wouldn't want that for my club, but that's what you're getting. And so we'll see how that goes. But I think Rosenior will be in, not by this weekend, but it'll be in by the next game. Look, I think Chelsea have had a lot of problems recently. Defensively, they can't play the same lineup one game to the next, and that's a problem. They can't rely on Fofana to play 2 games in a week. The balance of Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo, and Palmer hasn't worked since Palmer's return. But they haven't got Romeo Lavia, and Reece James can't play 2 games in a week. So there's things to fix for this guy McFarlane. Callum McFarlane is going to be in charge for this game. I think 𝗛𝗏 has been a flop up front. I think there's no way to describe it otherwise. He's either injured or getting booked and hasn't scored enough goals. And so you're relying on 𝗀𝗏𝗄. But again, I just think the thing is, they spent a lot of money on a lot of players. Is there a coherent team here? I think Maresca was trying to find it. I don't think it's there. So to go into this game on a bad run of form, having sacked the manager, that is not a great combination of things to go to Manchester City, who, look, they weren't great, I thought, against Sunderland. They didn't create much. The defenders really kept Haaland in their back pocket. Foden was anonymous. Savinho was poor. The only one I think to come out with any credit was probably Ryan Cherki, who I thought was good, who tried to create as much as he possibly could in this game, but not enough to get him the win. Concerns about Nico Gonzalez, because when Rodri came on to replace the injured Gonzalez, he's carrying some serious timber. Like, he looks overweight. He looks like he hasn't played for a while. Big, wide, white shorts don't suit someone who's just gone through Christmas and hasn't played for a year. And he was really flagging as that game went on. So, look, I think there are issues there with City. But I still think, despite the injuries, despite the concerns, they're going to be too good for a rudderless Chelsea. So take the City win at 1.68. I think it'll be a cool, calm, and comfortable but unimpressive win. Nice little group bet here of 1-0, 2-0, or 3-0 to City, coming in at 4, which I think is actually really, really generous. I'm struggling to see a Chelsea goal. -1 handicap, first one of any note, 2.63. And he's not scored for 2. It doesn't usually happen for 3. Haaland anytime at 1.57, I think is worth a punt.
Well, the head-to-head is really bad for Chelsea in recent years against City. Last season, they lost both games, and in the last 9 years, 5 wins for Chelsea, 16 for Man City. So you can tell the difference. And our smart bet is going for under 3.5 goals for this big game, the biggest game we have in this match day 25. Let's see, 20, sorry. Let's see what other smart bet options we have. We have full-time Man City, indeed, and corners. All right, Tom, this is it for our first video in 2026. Remember, guys, new year, new month, new options to win some money with Oddspedia. We have our tipster competitions going on. We will announce in our social media also the winners of December of 2025. There is a guy who won €1,000 for 2025.
Nice.
So not bad at all, indeed. It was a Brazilian guy, I think. But if you follow us on social media, we will make the announcement. And of course, we have rivals also where you can create your own tipster competitions, also available in this new year. Tom, let's go with your safe bet.
Safe bet's been tricky recently because there's been so many draws in the Premier League, but I'll take Manchester City to beat managerless Chelsea this weekend at 1.68.
Do not touch Man United, that's for sure. And with so many games, so many surprises, it's impossible to keep the rhythm every 3 days. And the ACCA, Tom?
Yeah, treble this week, let down by Man United last week on both fronts, so I'm not putting them in this time around. Villa to beat Nottingham Forest. I think they'll return to winning ways. Arsenal will go to Bournemouth and win there. But Man City in 2, it's quite a generous 4.04.
Very generous of you, very healthy, ACCA. Tom, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Bye-bye.